Hello and welcome to this special edition of North Central News. My name is Zoe Chrysostamides, and I am honored to be joined today by Fitchburg Police Chief Ernest Martineau, who has recently announced his retirement. Chief Martineau, thank you for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
So incredible to have you today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. To start, what inspired you to pursue a career in law enforcement?
Wow, that's a great question, and it goes way back. I told this story the night that I got sworn in as police chief. I was at B.F. Brown, 7th grade, 7th grade at B.F. Brown, right around the corner from here, and I was part of the student council, and part of the student council was you had to organize the school dances and things like that. During those days, we would hire an off-duty police officer to work the dances. And the first dance, I spent the night talking to the police officer working the detail, and I was more intrigued about what he did and what type of, what it was like to be a police officer. So then the next dance, as a 7th grader, talked to him again. And for the next 3 dances in a row, it was the same police officer.
Wow.
And he really inspired me at that age, 7th grade, to really want to pursue a career in law enforcement. The irony behind this was that police officer, his name was Peter Roddy. Peter Roddy was a Fitchburg police officer, but then he left Fitchburg and went and became the chief in Leominster.
Oh my gosh.
So it was kind of ironic that our career paths almost had a similar scheme.
They aligned really well.
It was really, just the irony behind it that, someone that inspired me to be a police chief, a police officer, went on to become a police chief. He was a sergeant with the Fitchburg Police Department. I was a sergeant with the Fitchburg Police Department. So a lot of irony.
Yeah.
But, at an early age, like I said, in 7th grade, it was intriguing. And I never veered off course after that point.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what has been the most rewarding part of your career?
Knowing that at some point during the last, I've been a police officer now for 37 years.
Oh, wow.
So knowing that there was many times during that career that I impacted someone's life. And I'll never know how I impacted that person. But you look back on how many different calls you may have gone on, how many, something as simple as pulling over a car because of a malfunctioning taillight. You may have just prevented that person from getting in an accident. So you go through your career and you just really don't truly get a grip on how many people's lives you impacted during that time. And it's really been inspiring for me, especially now at the end of my career, looking back. I have a picture on my desk of a little boy that was lost back in 1998, and I was the officer in charge, and we found him wandering around on Main Street, and we invited him into the police station. And this was probably before your time. The little snapshot pictures that you push a button and it come out of the camera.
Oh, the Polaroids?
Polaroids.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I took a picture of him, and I wrote his name on it and his date, and I just put it in my drawer. And just recently, I pulled it out, and I wanted to do a little bit of a search to see if I could find this kid. Well, now he's a young man.
Yeah.
And you would think that somehow I impacted that child's life that night. So it's those things that have really been the most rewarding in the last 37 years, knowing that we had a positive impact on many, many lives that we've touched.
Would you say that was your most memorable moment as chief?
That was before I was police chief.
Oh, okay.
There's been a lot of memorable things since I became police chief. I know I've impacted not only the lives of people that live in the city, but the men and women of the Fitchburg Police Department. But the list just goes on, and you find yourself, sometimes just thinking about all the different things that you've had some involvement in. Some of the bigger cases, maybe. Before I was chief, I was a detective, so I worked on a lot of high-profile cases before I became chief, and those really resonate with me. One that really resonates is the Jeremiah Oliver case. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. It was a little boy that was missing in Fitchburg, and he ended up, we finding him deceased, and it was...
Oh, that's awful.
And it was just that was one of those cases that really impacted who I was as a person and as a police officer. But the list goes on. It's just, especially when you look at a long career, how many cases you were involved in and how many lives you've impacted.
Yeah. You said you've been working in law enforcement for 37 years?
37.
Wow, that's a really long time. You may not be able to pinpoint an exact moment, but why don't you talk about the challenges you've had over time?
Challenges. After this long in law enforcement, I've seen it change drastically, the way we did things 37 years ago versus how we do it today.
Yeah, I can imagine.
and I think we've really grown as a profession on the way we do police people, which is very encouraging. For me to pinpoint just any one specific time, it's tough. I think about some of those many Christmas Eves that I worked, the many New Year's Eves we worked, the impact it has on your own personal family, working all those different holidays.
Definitely.
Especially here we are in the midst of the Christmas season, and some of those calls that really resonate with you, some of the calls that happened on Christmas Eve, the domestics, and seeing the impact it has on families. Those are the ones that really stick out and come back to your memory.
Yeah, you said you mentioned before the people of Fitchburg had a really strong impact on your career. So how has the relationship between the police department and the Fitchburg community changed over time?
I like to say I took a little bit part of this, but it takes more than one person. But I think the Fitchburg Police Department has created a strong trust relationship with the Fitchburg community. Something that was very important to me when I became chief in the police department was, the community has to trust who we are. And we have to have that type of relationship. So, part of my job in the early years as chief was to create those relationships and have a seat at the table. And whether it was the mock board that I would sit on, or the Three Pyramids board, it was so important to make those type of relationships. And I think we've done an extremely good job, and it's reflective on many different aspects. It's reflective on how the public perceives us. It's reflected on the complaints that come in against police officers. And I think we really have established that we are part of this community. And I've used this term before. Fitchburg Police is part of this community. We're not apart from it. We're part of the community, and I think it's reflective. And our demographics within the police department have changed drastically. So when I came on, we had one female police officer.
Oh wow!
Today we have 12.
That's incredible.
And that's out of 90 police officers, that's a significant amount of our workforce that are female. When I came on, we had 2 police officers that were of Latino descent. Today, I believe we're at 25 or 30. So when you look at the demographics of the Fitchburg Police Department, it's very reflective of the community that we live in. Something that, it is our strong suit. I think the diversity in the city makes us exactly who we are. And it's a very special city because of that diversified makeup. And I think it's positive that the police department is extremely reflective of that community.
Definitely. You mentioned a couple minutes ago that trust was a very, very big part of being part of the community. So how did you approach building trust?
By being accessible. And I think putting yourself out there in uncomfortable positions establishes that trust. A good friend of mine who's deceased now, Adrian Ford, who's the co-founder, the founder of the Three Pyramids organization, invited me day one to join his board. And Adrian Ford was a very active gentleman in the city of Fitchburg, always fighting for civil rights. And he invited me to the board. And when you put yourself in that position to sit sometimes in uncomfortable positions, you start to gain that trust. And there was many times I would go to meetings that weren't very friendly towards the police. In the last 10 years, unfortunately, there's been many instances of civil disruption because of actions that the police take. most recently the George Floyd case in Minnesota. I mean, we can go back every year, something would happen.
How do you manage those situations?
Just continually reminding the community that that's not who we are. That there's over 100,000 law enforcement officers in the United States, and you really almost beg, please don't judge us by the actions of one. That was the message after George Floyd. That was a horrific murder, what happened to him.
Yes.
And we don't tolerate that. We don't condone those actions. And don't judge all of us that wear this uniform by what you're seeing on TV. And I think at that point, especially after the George Floyd case, because we saw some of the civil unrest in the state of Massachusetts, you saw what type of trust we had in the community. We had a civil protest in Fitchburg. We had probably over 3,000 people come into town to march because of what happened to Mr. Floyd, and we didn't have any trouble here. Other parts of the state, there was violence, there was destruction of property. We had a very civil gathering that day with a lot of people expressing their frustration, expressing what had happened that was wrong. And the way we came out of it was just, it spoke volumes of who we were as a community and the type of relationship that we have with that community.
That's a very incredible story.
It is. Something I'm proud of.
You should be proud of that. What motivated you to continue serving for so many years?
The mere fact that I knew that I could impact someone's life at any given moment. Law enforcement is one of those jobs that there's no 2 days are alike. You never know what's gonna. You never know what's gonna happen. I was late tonight because you just never know. Unfortunately,
exactly.
That's just that's what comes to the job, and I think that's what motivates you to continue. You just the uncertainty, but also the certainty that you're going to impact someone's life.
As you're approaching retirement, what lessons have you learned over the course of you being chief for the last 10 years or for the last 37 years?
Treat people the way you want to be treated. Something I imposed on my children when they were growing up is no matter who you come across in life, is treat them the same way you would like to be treated. If you treat people with respect and dignity, no matter who they are, they can be the President of the United States or they could be someone that is down on their luck and homeless. You treat them equally, no matter who they are, and treat them the same way you want to be treated, you will always be successful.
That's really great. I'll definitely remember you saying that.
You.
You're welcome. How do you think your years of service has shaped the community and its approach to public safety?
Once again, I think we've created that level of trust and transparency, and it's really shaped who we are. In the last 10 years as chief, I think about all the initiatives we put forth. We brought on body cameras. Every Fitchburg police officer, we embraced body cameras when they first came out. There was a lot of departments that were hesitant on it. I knew that it was going to be a good tool because it would put my police officers on level playing field where everything that happened on the street would be recorded and it could be reviewed.
You're right.
And it was things like that that really, something that I'm proud of, that we have embraced. And I think it's made us better as a police force in policing our community.
That's really incredible. It seems like you learned a lot over these years. 37 years will do that to you.
Yeah.
You were definitely a different officer than you were when you first started.
The profession's different.
Yes.
It really is. And when I look back on it, we had a lot of growing up to do in our profession. we had to look ourselves in the mirror and say who we are and why we took this job. I look back on some of the major incidents that have happened in the last 30 years. And this was probably before you were born, but have you heard of the Rodney King incident from Los Angeles?
Yes, I don't know much about it, but I've heard about it.
So that was early on in my career. That was early 1990s. And that was just another example of something horrific that happened to someone of color at the hands of law enforcement. And it really started shaping our identity at that time. And we looked the way we transformed as a police force in the 90s, where it really switched towards a more of a community emphasis, community engagement. And during the early 90s, our police department doubled down on community engagement, community involvement. And we had made significant strides in the early to mid 1990s. And we were moving in the right direction. But then something happened in 2001 when the United States was attacked. And the Twin Towers got struck in New York City. And right away after that, law enforcement went back on the defensive, that we were under attack and we had to put up our shields. So a lot of that community engagement and community involvement disappeared after that. And then we had to grow again from that. So law enforcement has been like that roller coaster ride, trying to define ourselves, redefine ourselves, define ourselves, redefine ourselves. And I can honestly say that we are in a position today that, I wish we would have been in 30 years ago, but I'm really proud of where we have come as a profession.
That's amazing. Do you have any advice for the younger officers starting their career in law enforcement?
Yeah, love every day of it, because you're going to blink your eye and 37 years will have gone by. And it's so true. I mean, I remember coming on, some of the old timers gave me that same advice. Enjoy every day of this. One of my mentors coined this term. He said, as a young police officer, he said, Ernie, he goes, just remember one thing. You have front row seats to the greatest show on earth. And it's so true, because we're called in the best of times, and all too frequently we're called in the worst of times, when someone is in their worst or the lowest in life. And it truly is a front row seat to the greatest show on earth. The show is called humanity. And we play such an important role in that humanity that it's just something that you really have to embrace. And there's, in my opinion, there's no other profession like that in the world.
Definitely. What do you hope your legacy will be in Fitchburg and the community?
That I was an institute of change. I would hope that I would be remembered that I brought change to the police department. Good, bad, worse, I did bring change. That the change was embraced and it was something for the positive. I would like to be remembered that I cared immensely about the men and women of that police department. And I truly believe they understand that and they know that the most important thing to me is the health and welfare of every man and woman in that police department. When they're sick, I have a policy. If something happens to one of my officers, on duty or off duty, I want to be notified immediately. If someone's going to the hospital or if they have a parent that may have passed away, I think it's important that I know about that and that I make a phone call immediately and say, listen, I'm thinking of you. So I would hope that the men and women of the police department will remember me as a compassionate chief. And just, that I tried my best. And, I've seen the men and women come up through the ranks that are now vying for my position. And I feel very confident that this tradition is going to carry on. We've just gone through a chief's search process to name my successor. My 3 captains were part of that process, the 3 captains that work under me. So they're all aspiring to become the next police chief. And I'm encouraged because all 3 of them are exceptional candidates. So no matter which one the mayor chooses to be the next police chief, will be an exceptional chief. And I have no doubt they're going to continue in the same tradition that I set forth, but with a little twist to their own little flair. Because I think, I think change is good for an organization. I could work another 5 years before I would be mandated to retire, but I think change is good. I've been the head of that agency for 10 years now, and I think it's time to bring in some new ideas and just expand upon what we've done. Speaking of change, what are your plans for retirement? One of my plans, that's a great question. I'm not retiring. Okay. Nope. I always had a second profession. I'm a carpenter by trade. believe
Oh,
it or
wow.
not. And I had my own carpentry business. For years, I had my own carpentry business. Built houses, additions, sheds, anything to do with wood, I did. And I had a very successful business before I became police chief. When I became chief, I had to dissolve my business because you can't have any outside conflicts.
Right.
So I dissolved my business 10 years ago. And I was thinking about what did I want to do in retirement because I'm, quite frankly, just too young to do nothing. And I said, you know what? I was always good at building houses. I was always good at constructing things. I was always good at working with customers because carpentry and running a construction business, there's some
Go hand in
similarities.
hand, yeah.
It really is because it's all customer based. I mean, that's what I do right now as police chief. It's customer based. So I'm going back into my construction business.
That's awesome.
I've reinstituted my business, and I'm looking forward. But now, going into retirement, I'm going to do it on my terms. I will pick and choose which jobs I would like to do.
Yeah.
So, I'm looking forward to going back into that industry and building things. And it's once again you're building dreams for a person, whether it's a house or an addition. And like I said, there's a lot of similarities between what I've done in law enforcement and as a carpenter.
That's awesome. Well, Chief, I'm in need of a new carpet if you want to start your business now.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
Thank you
Sounds
so
good.
much for being here today, and I wish you the best of luck in your new career, or should I say, picking up your
Thank
career.
you. And just to end note, I'd like to thank FATV. They've been such a part of this community, and Nathan and his team and everybody here at FATV has always been warm and welcoming to me. This isn't my first time sitting in a studio. I've really enjoyed coming in, and whether it was Barbara or Sam Squallier at the time, or I've done many interviews here, and FATV has really had a major impact on the community, and they continue to do so. So thank you to FATV. Thank you for what you do, and this has really been, I've enjoyed this evening.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you.